the most dangerous and cruel criminal. A terror. Unleashing in the shadowy corners of the criminal underworld, one name strikes fear into the hearts of people, the name of a man whose cruelty knows no bounds. He is not just a criminal, he is a nightmare brought to life, a ruthless predator who has left a trail of terror in his wake. Despite the efforts of law enforcement, he remains a ghost, evading capture and continuing his reign of horror. This criminal, known for his merciless and calculated brutality, has become the most feared figure in recent history. He does not kill out of rage or impulse. His actions are cold, premeditated, and methodically executed. He is responsible for the brutal murders of 5 innocent college girls, young women with bright futures, whose lives were cut short in the most horrific way. The sheer brutality of the crimes has left the city shaken, and the fear of his next move looms over everyone like a dark cloud. His past crimes are no less horrifying. He has a history of violence, his name whispered in connection to unsolved disappearances and murders that date back years. Law enforcement has tried to piece together his patterns, but he is always one step ahead. Some believe he is a mastermind, carefully orchestrating his crimes so that no trace of evidence leads back to him. Others fear he may have powerful connections, allowing him to slip through the cracks of the justice system. The terror he has spread is unlike anything the city has seen before. Parents fear for their daughters, students no longer feel safe in their dorms, and the streets that once buzzed with life now feel eerily silent after dark. The police have ramped up security, warning the public to stay alert, yet the fear remains. Every shadow seems menacing, every stranger a potential threat. There is an urgency to capture him, a desperate need to put an end to his monstrous deeds. The families of the victims cry out for justice. The media demands answers, and the authorities face mounting pressure to bring him to justice before more lives are lost. But with each passing day, he remains at large, his identity unknown, his next move unpredictable. The world watches in horror, asking the same haunting question: who is this man, and how long before he strikes again? The murders of the 5 college girls, a city in fear. It started as an ordinary semester in the city's most prestigious college, where students were busy with their studies, friendships, and dreams. But soon, a dark cloud settled over the campus, turning joy into fear. One by one, 5 young college girls disappeared without a trace, only to be found dead in the most gruesome manner. Their murders were not random acts of violence. They were calculated, executed with chilling precision, and left behind a message that haunted the city: how and where the crimes took place. The first victim, a bright and ambitious student, went missing on her way back from the library late at night. Her body was discovered 2 days later in an abandoned building, her hands tied, and a strange symbol carved into her skin. The brutality of her death sent shockwaves through the community. The second girl disappeared from her dormitory. The security footage showed nothing unusual, no forced entry, no struggle. Her body was later found in a deserted park, positioned in an eerie, ritualistic manner. The similarities to the first case confirmed the worst fears. A serial killer was on the loose. The third, fourth, and fifth murders followed in rapid succession. Each victim was taken from different locations, but their bodies were found with the same disturbing signature: symbols carved onto their skin and placed in isolated areas. It was clear the killer was not acting on impulse. He had a plan, and he executed it flawlessly. The impact on the victims' families and the public. The families of the victims were shattered. Each girl had dreams, ambitions, and futures full of promise. Their parents, siblings, and friends were left devastated, struggling to comprehend the cruelty of the crimes. Grief turned into rage, demanding justice, but the killer remained elusive. Fear spread like wildfire across the city. Students no longer felt safe in their dorms or on campus. Night classes were canceled, and security was tightened, yet the fear persisted. Every young woman felt like a potential target, and every dark alley seemed to hide a lurking threat. The media covered the case relentlessly, fueling public panic and pressuring the authorities to act swiftly. clues or patterns that link the killings together. As investigators pieced together the evidence, a chilling pattern emerged. Each victim had received a cryptic message days before their disappearance, short handwritten notes with unsettling phrases like, "You're not safe," or "Your time is near." Yet none of them had taken the messages seriously, assuming them to be pranks. The symbols carved into the victims' bodies were another disturbing clue. Experts analyzed them and found connections to ancient rituals, suggesting the killer had a deeper, possibly psychological or ideological motive behind his crimes. Despite these patterns, the police struggled to find a concrete lead. The killer left no fingerprints, no DNA, no security footage. It was as if he was a ghost, watching from the shadows, waiting for his next victim. With 5 lives lost and no suspect in sight, the city lived in fear, asking the same chilling question: who will be next? The police investigation and challenges. The brutal murders of 5 innocent college girls sent shockwaves through the city, and law enforcement agencies immediately launched an intense investigation to catch the killer. Detectives, forensic experts, and cybercrime specialists worked day and night, trying to piece together clues that could lead to the murderer. However, despite their relentless efforts, the case proved to be one of the most challenging in recent history. How the police have tried to catch the criminal. From the moment the first body was discovered, the police treated the case as a high-priority investigation. They interviewed friends, classmates, and family members of the victims, hoping to find a common link between them. CCTV footage from the victims' last known locations was thoroughly examined, and their phone records were analyzed for any suspicious contacts. A special task force was formed, including some of the city's best detectives. Crime scene experts tried to decode the mysterious symbols carved into the victims' bodies, while forensic teams searched for any DNA evidence left behind. Psychological profilers were also brought in to understand the killer's mindset, hoping it would help predict his next move. Despite their efforts, the murderer remained a step ahead. He left no fingerprints, no DNA, and no clear pattern of movement. It was as if he was watching the police, anticipating their next move, and deliberately avoiding every possible mistake. The obstacles the police face. The investigation was riddled with challenges that made it nearly impossible to track down the killer. 1. Lack of evidence. The most frustrating aspect of the case was the absence of physical evidence. The crime scenes were clean, with no hair, blood, or fibers left behind. The killer was meticulous, covering his tracks so well that investigators struggled to find anything that could lead to an arrest. 2. Mysterious identity. Unlike typical criminals, this killer did not leave behind a clear signature, except for the cryptic symbols on the victims' bodies. No eyewitnesses had seen him, no security cameras had captured his face, and there were no known enemies or suspects. He operated like a ghost, striking without warning and disappearing without a trace. 3. Corruption and internal leaks. As the case gained media attention, rumors began to surface that someone within law enforcement was leaking information. Key details of the investigation were somehow making their way to the public before the police intended, which led to speculation that the killer might have inside connections. Some officers even suspected that someone within the system was protecting him. Public fear and panic. The entire city was gripped with fear. Students refused to leave their dorms after dark, and parents demanded answers. The pressure on the police was overwhelming, with daily protests and heated debates questioning their competence. Every press conference was filled with anger and frustration as reporters demanded updates. Public outrage and media coverage. The case became the biggest news story in the country. Every television channel, newspaper, and social media platform covered the murders extensively, adding to the paranoia. Some journalists portrayed the police as incompetent, while others speculated on conspiracy theories. Was this the work of a cult, a serial killer with a hidden motive, or someone with powerful connections, ensuring he would never be caught? The victims' families led emotional protests, holding up pictures of their daughters and demanding justice. Their pain resonated with the public, intensifying pressure on law enforcement. Politicians and activists also got involved, criticizing the police for their failure to make an arrest. Despite all their efforts, the biggest question remained unanswered. Who was the killer, and would he strike again? The police were running out of time, and the city was running out of patience. The criminal's mysterious identity and tactics. The identity of the killer remains the greatest mystery surrounding the case. Despite the police's best efforts, no concrete evidence points to who he is or where he might be hiding. He operates like a phantom, striking, vanishing, and leaving behind only fear and unanswered questions. His ability to evade capture suggests he is no ordinary murderer. He is calculated, disciplined, and possibly well-trained in covering his tracks. His methods of evading capture: 1. Leaving no physical evidence. Unlike impulsive killers who leave behind traces of DNA, fingerprints, or hair, this criminal is methodical. He ensures that no biological evidence is left at the crime scenes. Forensic experts have found no fibers, footprints, or bloodstains, nothing that can be traced back to him. This level of precision suggests he has knowledge of forensic science, possibly from a background in law enforcement, medicine, or the military. 2. Manipulating surveillance systems. Despite living in a world filled with security cameras, the killer has never been caught on video. Investigators suspect that he carefully studies his surroundings before acting, identifying blind spots in security coverage or disabling cameras before striking. There are even theories that he might be using disguises or altering his appearance to avoid recognition. 3. Changing his patterns. Serial killers often follow predictable patterns, but this one seems to change his approach just enough to confuse investigators. While the cryptic symbols on the victims' bodies suggest a ritualistic element, the locations, methods of abduction, and timelines are inconsistent. This makes it difficult to predict his next move. 4. Using fear to control the narrative. The cryptic messages sent to the victims before their deaths serve not only as psychological torture, but also as a way to instill fear. By making his presence known without revealing his identity, he ensures that people remain paranoid, making it harder for law enforcement to gather reliable witnesses. Psychological profile and possible motives. Criminal profilers have analyzed the case and created a chilling psychological portrait of the killer. Highly intelligent and patient, his ability to plan, execute, and escape undetected suggests a high level of intelligence. He does not act on impulse. He carefully selects his victims, studies their routines, and waits for the perfect moment to strike. Possible personal vendetta or ideological drive. The symbols carved into the victims' bodies indicate that the murders might have a deeper meaning. Some experts believe he may be following a personal belief system, possibly tied to revenge, cult rituals, or psychological trauma. Cold and emotionless. The way he kills without hesitation and leaves no trace of remorse suggests a lack of empathy. He sees his victims not as human beings but as part of a game or mission. A connection to the victims? While no direct link has been found, investigators believe the killer may have known or observed his victims long before targeting them. His messages to them before their deaths indicate that they were not random choices. Possible connections or allies. Helping him stay hidden. The idea that the killer is working alone has been questioned. There are several theories suggesting he may have connections or accomplices who help him evade capture. 1. An inside man in law enforcement. Given how easily he avoids detection, some believe he may have a contact within the police department or another law enforcement agency. Key details of the investigation have been leaked, leading many to suspect corruption within the system. 2. A criminal network. Another theory suggests that the killer might be part of a larger underground network, possibly a secret society or a cult. The symbols on the victims' bodies hint at something beyond an ordinary murder spree. 3. A master of manipulation. If he is working alone, he may have an uncanny ability to manipulate those around him, using fake identities and disguises to blend into society without raising suspicion. With no clear leads and the killer still at large, the biggest question remains. Is he truly alone, or is there a greater force protecting him from the shadows? Climax and unresolved mystery. Despite months of investigation, the case seemed to be at a standstill. The police were running out of options, the city was gripped with fear, and the killer remained untouchable. But then, an unexpected breakthrough changed everything. A new lead, a cryptic message, and a hidden clue. One evening, an anonymous letter arrived at the police station. It contained no fingerprints, no DNA, just a single line of text. "You're looking in the wrong places. She knew me before she died." Attached was a grainy photograph of one of the murdered girls, taken just days before her disappearance. In the background, partially blurred, was the shadowy figure of a man. His face was turned away, but his posture, the angle of his head, it was enough to suggest that he had been watching her. This was the first real clue the police had, a possible sighting of the killer. Investigators quickly scoured security footage from the area where the photo had been taken. After hours of searching, they found a match. A hooded figure walking behind the victim, always keeping his distance, but never too far away. The chilling realization struck. The killer had been right in front of them the whole time. A dramatic confrontation. The killer's escape. With this new lead, the police narrowed their search to a specific neighborhood where similar figures had been spotted near other victims. Undercover officers patrolled the area, hoping to catch the killer in the act. Then, one night, a patrol officer noticed a man matching the suspect's description standing near an alley, staring at a young woman who was unaware of his presence. As soon as the officer approached, the man turned and walked away. The officer called for backup and followed, but the suspect knew he was being watched. What happened next was a chilling game of cat and mouse. The suspect led officers through dark alleys, abandoned buildings, and crowded streets. Each time they got close, he vanished, ducking into shadows, blending with crowds, and using his knowledge of the city's layout to escape. Finally, in a deserted warehouse, the police cornered him. Guns were drawn, orders were shouted, but in the blink of an eye, the man slipped through a hidden passage. By the time officers reached the other side, he was gone. All that remained was a single object left behind, a small blood-stained note that read, "Not today, but soon." The unresolved mystery. Is he still out there? The failed capture sent shockwaves through the city. The police had been close, closer than ever before, but the killer had once again outsmarted them. The public, initially relieved at the breakthrough, now felt an even deeper fear. If he had evaded capture this time, what was stopping him from killing again? No one knew when or where he would strike next, but one thing was certain: he wasn't finished. And somewhere, in the darkness, he was watching, waiting, and planning his next move. The hunt wasn't over. The nightmare had only just begun.